I know how strange that sounds. Especially when I tell you this story isn't really about happiness. At least not the kind you expect. Before I begin, do me a favor. If you believe stories can still surprise you, if you've ever had a moment that quietly changed your life, hit subscribe, because this channel is where real stories live. The ones that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Now let me tell you how a single phone call rewrote everything I thought I knew. Lucas never imagined the night would start the way it did. It was raining, soft at first, then heavier, Seattle rain that didn't announce itself, just settled in and stayed. He was sitting alone in his apartment, shoes kicked off, phone face down on the table, letting the sound of rain fill the silence he'd grown used to. That was when his phone lit up. The name on the screen made his stomach tighten. Aunt Claire. He hadn't seen that name pop up in years. Lucas stared at it longer than he should have, his thumb hovering. Some part of him wanted to ignore it, let it ring into memory like so many other things he'd quietly stepped away from. He answered. Lucas. Her voice came through warm and familiar, but thinner than he remembered, like it had been carrying something heavy for too long. It's been such a long time. Before he could respond, another voice joined the call. Aunt Margaret. Calm. Measured. Steady. The kind of voice that always sounded like it had already made a decision before you even spoke. We were hoping you could do something for us, Margaret said. Lucas frowned, sitting up straighter. What kind of something? There was a pause. Not an awkward one. A careful one. Not a favor, Claire added quickly. Not an obligation. Margaret continued, her tone precise. We want you to come spend a week with us. Lucas almost laughed. A week? Out of nowhere? Just us, Claire said softly. Not as family you're expected to visit, but as people who care about you. The words landed heavier than they should have. Lucas felt something shift in his chest. Confusion mixed with an unease he couldn't name. When? He asked. Margaret answered without hesitation. Tomorrow if you can. The call ended shortly after that. No explanations. No details. Just silence. Lucas sat there staring at his phone long after the screen went dark. He barely knew them. Two sisters who lived separate lives, Oregon and Canada. Women who existed mostly as names on holiday cards and polite smiles across crowded tables. So why did it feel like this wasn't a simple invitation? By morning he'd packed a bag. The drive north felt longer than it should have. Rain gave way to pale sunlight, then back again. Lucas kept telling himself this was normal, just family reconnecting. Yet every mile carried a quiet sense of inevitability, like he was moving towards something already decided. The lakehouse appeared in the afternoon, tucked between tall pines, its windows glowing warmly against the gray sky. Claire was waiting at the door. She hugged him the moment he stepped out of the car, tight, lingering, as if afraid he might disappear again. You're really here, she said, her smile trembling just slightly. Margaret stood behind her, composed as ever. She placed a hand lightly on his arm. You must be tired. Commune. Inside, the house smelled of fresh bread and lavender. A fire crackled in the living room, filling the space with warmth and silence. They weren't asking the usual questions. No small talk about work. No polite updates about life. Instead, they listened. Really listened. They asked about his thoughts, his regrets, the loneliness he never admitted out loud. And then slowly, they began to share their own. How time had slipped away. How quiet houses felt louder than busy ones. How the world grew colder when people stopped truly seeing you. Lucas felt something change in the room. This wasn't a visit. This was something else. That night, alone in the guest room, Lucas lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every word, every look. Outside, the lake shimmered under moonlight. And deep down he already knew. This week would not be ordinary. This was only the beginning. The morning felt unreal. Mist rolled slowly across the lake, thick and silver, like the world was trying to hide something. Lucas stood by the window of the guest room, watching the water move without sound. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, memories replayed themselves. Claire's quiet laughter, Margaret's steady gaze, the way the house seemed to breathe around them. For the first time since arriving, a thought pressed heavily into his chest. I should leave. Not because something had happened, but because something almost had. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Before he could answer, the door opened. Claire stepped inside. She wore a loose sweater, her hair unbound, her expression softer than the night before. There was no playful edge now. No nerves left it. "You're awake," she said quietly. Lucas nodded. "I didn't really sleep." She walked closer, stopping near the window beside him. They stood shoulder to shoulder, staring out at the lake. "It's peaceful," she said. "That's why we love this place." He didn't answer. After a moment, she spoke again, this time slower, heavier. "You've probably felt it by now," she said. "That something isn't normal." Lucas exhaled. "Yay." She turned toward him, her eyes searching his face. "We never meant to make you uncomfortable." Before he could respond, footsteps sounded in the hallway. Margaret appeared in the doorway. She took in the scene quietly, the two of them by the window, the tension hanging thick between them. "Breakfast is ready," she said. They sat at the table in near silence. The clink of utensils sounded louder than it should have. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust particles drifting in the air. Finally, Margaret folded her hands and spoke. "We owe you honesty." Lucas looked up. Claire swallowed, her fingers tightening around her mug. Margaret continued, her voice steady but no longer guarded. "When your father passed, something broke in all of us." Lucas froze. His father's name hadn't been spoken in years. "He was the one who kept us connected," Claire added softly. "After he was gone, everything unraveled." Lucas stared at the table. Memories surfaced, his father's laugh, the way he used to make room for everyone, even when life was heavy. Margaret leaned forward. "You remind us of him," she said plainly. "More than you realize." Lucas felt his throat tighten. "That's why we called you," Claire admitted. "Not because we were lonely, but because we were afraid." "Afraid of what?" Lucas asked. Margaret met his eyes. "Of losing the last piece of him." The words settled slowly. Everything made sense now. The intensity, the closeness, the way they listened as if every word mattered. This wasn't desire. This was grief, unresolved and aching. Claire's eyes filled with tears. "We crossed lines emotionally," she said. "Not intentionally. We just forgot ourselves." Lucas stood up. The room went still. He walked around the table and did something none of them expected. He hugged them. Both of them. Not tightly. Not desperately. Just firmly grounded. The way his father used to hug people. Claire broke down quietly. Margaret closed her eyes, her shoulders relaxing for the first time all week. They stayed like that for a long moment. When Lucas finally stepped back, he knew. It was time to go. The drive home felt lighter. The rain had stopped. The sky was open. Lucas didn't feel confused anymore. He felt clear. That evening, he stopped by a small park, one he used to visit with his dad when he was younger. He sat on a bench, phone in hand, scrolling through old photos. One picture made him smile. His father, arm around him, both of them laughing at nothing. Lucas whispered quietly to himself. You still knew how to show up, even now. And that's when it hit him. The truth behind everything. The call. The week. The emotions. It wasn't about the lake house. It wasn't about his aunts. It was about inheritance. Not money, not objects. But presence. His father had taught him how to make people feel seen. And this week, without realizing it, Lucas had done the same. So when someone asked him later that day how he was doing, he smiled and said, "My dad made me happy today." Because even after death, some people never really leave.